What's up, YouTube? Ryan Panny here. Hope you guys are doing reasonably well. It is time to talk Kendrick Lamar. Easily one of my favorite artists ever to discuss because his music is so dense and so multifaceted that it leaves so much for us to pick apart and to analyze. And with his 4 outstanding studio albums that he's released thus far, 3 of which are absolutely essential, I've spent many hours doing just that, as has any major music publication that's worth a damn, pun intended. And yeah, in my opinion, all 4 of these albums, or 5 if you count Untitled Unmastered, are worth picking apart for hours and hours and hours. But what about all the amazing music that Kendrick Lamar has contributed to hip hop that has nothing to do with his own albums? What about the guy's feature catalog? After all, guest appearances are one of the most important ways for any up-and-coming artist to establish their dominance in this competitive art form of rap music. You know, you scorch a bunch of your peers on their own tracks, you keep your name ringing in between your releases, and you're gonna eventually elevate your stature. The most obvious example I can think of in my lifetime is Lil Wayne. Like, during that insane mid-2000s to late 2000s run that Lil Wayne had, he's remembered just as much for his guest appearances, like Make It Rain, that Lloyd song You, We Taking Over, the DJ Khaled song. He's remembered just as much for any of these moments as he is for the Carter 2 and 3, or Drought 3, or Dedication 2, or any of his important projects. Now, with Kendrick Lamar, after he exploded with his classic major label debut, Good Kid, Mad City in 2012, he went on a similarly ballistic features run, which of course culminated in the infamous Control verse in mid-2013, which fucking broke the internet and grinded hip-hop to a halt. And that particular verse, along with many show-stealing contributions to other artists' material, is what helped cement Kendrick Lamar as, to a lot of people, the best rapper alive at that time. And that 2-year run was awesome, but the reality is that since 2011, Kendrick Lamar has never really let up on the guest spots at all, dropping just a consistent barrage of memorable features and, more often than not, outdoing rappers on their own songs. So I wanted to celebrate all these great Kendrick guest verses by giving myself the remarkably difficult task of narrowing it down and ranking the top 10 Kendrick Lamar features, which, like, my initial first cut here when I was first doing my research, I was down to like 35 options. So I really struggled for several weeks to narrow this thing down. And to tell the truth, the only way that I was even able to do so was to just say fuck it and go solely with my personal preference. Otherwise, so many of these verses were so good for different reasons that I just would have fucking driven myself insane. And the big moment for me, this is a little spoiler here, but the big moment for me was when I decided to exclude his really popular Fucking Problems verse off that A$AP Rocky track. When I knew I wasn't gonna put that in the list, that was a moment where I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna go with what my favorites are, because you're gonna leave one out anyway. There's always something that you're gonna leave out. But I still gotta shout out at least my 11 to 15 picks, because those were the cuts where I really experienced the most pain. So shout out to Kanye West, No Parties in LA, Danny Brown, Really Dough, DJ Khaled, Holy Key, BJ the Chicago Kid, New Cupid, very underrated one, The Weeknd, Sidewalks, another great verse. So believe me, if any of those are on your list, you're not wrong. And no, I will not be including that god-awful Maroon 5 feature that he did, or the Taylor Swift one, or the Sia one. Yeah, I think it's best advised that Kendrick just steer clear of pop music altogether. I think we can agree on that. So at number 10, probably my most surprising pick in this list, the 2013 50 Cent single We Up, which Kendrick spit a 16 on. This is back when the 50 Cent album Street King Immortal was only delayed by like 2 years and hadn't yet become the detox of G-Unit Records, which it has now. That record still has a Wikipedia page as if it's like gonna come out tomorrow. This might seem like a strange pick, but you know what I absolutely love about Kendrick's contribution to this song? In contrast to many of his more iconic guest appearances where Kendrick like practically takes over the artist's song and has this long, drawn out spaz fest over it, this verse is just this short but sweet flex. It's Kendrick proving that in the same way he can handle a 64-bar long-ass narrative, he can also jump in, hit you with a bunch of quick and dirty punchlines, and bounce. Which, that ability to be concise and still make an impact in that short time is just as impressive. This verse is a quick 16 bars, in and out. There is absolutely zero fat on it, whether he's talking about beating a murder charge that he hasn't even caught yet, or questioning the masculinity of his competitors, or talking about the paranoia that his success has brought upon him. Or maybe my favorite line when he's talking about he's on Instagram looking at your favorite singer and debating whether he should fuck her or jump on her single, which I thought was really slick because at the time, Kendrick was collaborating with so many artists, male and female, so it kind of felt feasible almost. And then also the line that comes immediately after it, where he's talking about how this singer is gonna pay him $20,000 for just an ad-lib, is really dope. And it almost kind of reminds me of when 2 Chainz started bragging about charging $100,000 a feature. So yeah, for all of Kendrick's dense conceptuality and politically conscious rhymes, We Up is an important showcase in his career because it shows that when he needs to, he's able to kind of dumb it down a shade and just give you that simple but effective flex. When artists aren't able to come down to that level and have some fun, that's when they start feeling a little bit preachy. So a big component in Kendrick becoming so likable and ultimately so successful is his versatility and his ability to jump on a 50 Cent song and then talk about Black Lives Matter in the next song. Number 9 goes to Pusha T's Nostalgia, one of many essential tracks on his 2013 album My Name Is My Name. Shout out to The Wire for that reference. Kendrick's verse on this one fucking steals the song, if you ask me. I just love the way that he ties that neat bow around the verse at the very end by tying it into that larger metaphor of the rap game versus the crack game. The way he tells his father that, in a way, he is carrying on that dope dealing legacy of his family because his music is like crack that he's selling and distributing. And in his words, every verse is a brick. It's a concept that can't help but call to mind, for me, the Kanye West song Crack Music. And not to mention, in the middle of this verse, there's that really clever 3-bar wordplay segment with the numbers 9 and 10, which I really enjoyed, and I'm sure that anybody who enjoys the craft of MCing will appreciate the cheekiness of that. And the other thing about this verse is that whether it's truly autobiographical or not, Kendrick really lets the listener in terms of his father's drug problem and the toxic environment in which he grew up. And the whole thing is pretty haunting when you really sit back and visualize what he's talking about. It matches the grit of Pusha T's Coke Boy rhymes so perfectly. And you know, for all the street talk in Kendrick's music, there's not a lot of talk about the drug game specifically. So this is actually kind of an unusual digression for Kendrick. At number 8, Kendrick's verse on Meek Mill's A1 Everything, a fucking banger off of Meek's 2012 mixtape Dream Chasers 2, which, if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure that's still the #1 downloaded mixtape in Dat Piff history, is it not? I just think this is one of Kendrick's most convincing flexes, and as far as early Kendrick really feeling himself, I prefer this one over the fucking Problems verse. There are several fantastic one-liners in here. Like he says, 24-year-old millionaire, don't read the contract unless a mill in there. There's a line about Jerome Bettis, sleep on me if you want to take a dirt nap. There's a lot of lines on here that I really like. And I also think that it's really creative how later in this verse, Kendrick rhymes the onomatopoeia of gun sounds with actual words. Like he takes ka 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 and rhymes it with pop your top off and no I got you. Plus, to be fair, Meek's verse on this one, he takes the first verse in the song, is one of his weakest verses on the whole tape, so Kendrick obviously scorches him on this track. Number 7, super underrated verse in my opinion, Kendrick's verse at the end of the Dr. Dre song Dark Side Gone. First off, Kendrick's rapid fire stop-start flow on this song is fucking insane. The way he just machine guns the words at you and then halts it with those last 2 syllables and the layered vocals on top of them. But the big thing that people forget about this verse, and actually one other line on the Dr. Dre Compton album, which this came out around the time of the NWA movie, the thing that people forget is the not so subtle shots at Drake on this song. Because in 2015, the Kendrick Lamar versus Drake thing wasn't necessarily the Cold War that it's become now. At this time, there was still a legitimate shot of these two really going at it. And it was really exciting to hear Kendrick kind of address that in a dope but pretty subtle way. Also, the way that Kendrick transitions with the beat switch underneath him in this verse, it's like the 3-minute, 10-second mark, if you want to follow along. That's my other favorite part of this verse. I just can't help myself. Definitely a slept-on moment in the Kendrick Lamar feature catalog. Numero 6 goes to the 2012 Schoolboy Q track Blessed, which is right around the first time I saw Schoolboy Q live, so I remember this period fondly. But just a fucking incredible King Kendrick guest verse on this track. Flow-wise, he hits you with another real one-of-a-kind staccato flow on here where he bends his voice to sound just as mechanical as the 16th note drum programming that's behind him. But what's ultimately so special about this verse is that it's Kendrick at his most inspirational. Because when you really break it down, Kendrick's music is pretty pessimistic. But this verse on this track is the kind of verse that'll put stars in your eyes and that will really inspire you. And mostly what he's speaking to is kind of autobiographical. This kid from the ghetto trying to avoid the pitfalls around him and use music to improve his life and get out of his current situation. Most of that is really about Kendrick and people like Kendrick, but he's so inspiring in this verse that I feel like everybody can get a sort of motivation and a sense of uplifting from this. And of course, just the crazy, amazing instrumental from Dave Free on this track, that doesn't hurt either. Anybody who wonders why Schoolboy Q's music is such a big deal when it drops now, I mean, you can just go back to a track like this on Habits and Contradictions and you kind of hear why. Okay, first entry into the top 5, Kendrick's fiery, impassioned tirade against critics in the excellent Tech Nine song Fragile. I love angry Kendrick, man. Mad City, Blacker the Berry, this verse. Sometimes it's when Kendrick's at his most venomous and just seeing red that his music is the most powerful. This is the kind of verse that'll make every music journalist and every music critic think twice before they say something excessively mean about a piece of music, because it so clearly paints the picture of an artist that has just poured their heart and soul into a piece of music just to have that passion stepped on by some hipster blogger. Even though Kendrick has actually been incredibly fortunate in the critical reception realm, especially in contrast to Tech Nine, it doesn't make what he's saying any less poignant or any less real. At number 4, an absolute shoo-in for this list, Kendrick's verse on Eminem's Love Game. That was a big deal. That was sort of a passing the torch moment when Eminem chose Kendrick as the lone rapping feature on his highly anticipated Marshall Mathers LP 2. And man, Kendrick did not disappoint. He manages to be as hilarious and off the wall and misogynistic and just downright ridiculous as vintage Eminem on here. He matches Eminem's signature insanity bar for bar and manages to be pretty lyrical while doing it. He's got jokes on here about a girl giving head in the carpool lane. He's got jokes on here about him eating her out while she's on her period. He's got jokes about the girl catching a manslaughter case because her grandma walks in while she's having sex with some guy and she accidentally drowns him. He somehow sneaks in, at the time, a very relevant George Zimmerman, Trayvon Martin reference. And I just think this was one of several moments in 2013 that really solidified Kendrick Lamar as big time in the rap game. Hearing him going bar for bar with Eminem and a lot of people saying that his verse was way better than Eminem's first verse, at least on this song, that was a pretty big deal. Number 3, probably the most singular pick on this list, Kendrick's dazzling virtuosic feature on the Flying Lotus track Never Catch Me. This is probably the most technically impressive performance of any of the other ones we talked about on this list. Kendrick's ability to adapt his spazzy flow to this constantly evolving jazz fusion instrumental underneath him is just breathtaking, as are his layered melodic vocals, which kind of give it that spacey feel. And I also really enjoy his decision here to make his lyrics kind of abstract and leave a lot of space for interpretation. And also what puts this so high on this list is I feel like Kendrick is one of the only contemporary MCs that could handle an instrumental like this, and that sets him apart right there. Imagine Big Sean or Migos or Drake on this instrumental. Which, speaking of Drizzy, at a surprisingly high number 2 is Kendrick's appearance on Drake's 2011 LP Take Care, the song Buried Alive. Drake basically turned this whole song over to Kendrick Lamar, who proceeded to deliver one of my personal favorite rap verses of all time. In a real vivid way, Kendrick puts you right there in that short moment in his career where he was just on the cusp of stardom and just meeting Drake for the first time and feeling all sorts of weird jealousy towards him and how successful he is, and at the same time having all these maddening, conflicting thoughts about wanting to be as successful as Drake and have all these materialistic things. And as this long verse continues, you realize that Kendrick's kind of beating himself up for it because he realizes the shallowness and the vanity of it and how things like fame and money and pussy shouldn't matter, but he can't help himself. He can't help his thoughts. And you watch him go through this really brutal internal battle with himself, and it's all through the visual of him and Drake just sitting at some restaurant in Toronto being waited on by a white woman and talking about the industry. My favorite part of this whole verse might be the moment when Drake says to Kendrick, he says, "You belong to the people when you're outside," which kind of reveals that almost slave-like component of being famous, where once you're a certain level of famous, you're not able to live this quiet, normal life anymore. Your fans kind of own you in this weird way. They own a piece of who you are. It's crazy and just mind-blowing to think about. And it's something that few people experience. So when Kendrick gives you such a clear window into it, it's just fascinating. And number one was actually very easy here. To some people, a watershed moment for this decade in hip hop. Kendrick's Control verse, which of course is infamous for Kendrick calling out contemporaries like Drake and Big Sean in this verse. But unfortunately, the other 55 bars or whatever it is are completely overlooked because it's just a killer verse, period. It has nothing to do with the names. It's just so fucking mean and so full of testosterone, and it references everything from Lindsay Lohan to James Bond to Jay-Z's Where I'm From to Corrupt's New York, New York to Paul McCartney. Like, no one's safe here. And I gotta say, the line on here, your Instagram can gobble these nuts. That has to be like the best line uttered in the history of hip hop. That shit makes me laugh. Not suck these nuts, not swallow these nuts, gobble these nuts. And I realized that a lot of people in hip hop were salty about this verse, but it says a lot that the OGs, the Eminems and Talib Kweli's and Prodigies and Bun B's of the world were all supportive of Kendrick, and they all respected that competitive spirit that it came from. I think a lot of music critics would argue that this is a moment where MCs, at least temporarily, were forced to step their game up a little bit. And that's it. I had so much fucking fun putting this list together. It was a lot of work, but it was worth it. And I really hope that all the Kendrick fans watching and all the rap fans watching really enjoyed this countdown, in spite of maybe some of my picks going against the grain a little bit. As always, thanks so much for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video and are not yet subscribed to my channel, please consider doing so by clicking right over here. And also checking out any of the other music-related, hip-hop-related content that I publish on this channel on a weekly basis. Really appreciate you hitting that like button and commenting and interacting and arguing and just supporting me in any way. So again, really hope you enjoyed this video. Really appreciate your support, and I will see you guys soon.